The Pluto, this is the Pluto, the former ninth planet, or at least what they told us in school. In 2006, they changed their mind and said, no, the Pluto is not a planet at all. But they had taken us down, and so did the Pluto. A group of scientists did not give up. The year the Pluto was removed from the list of planets, new space scientists named the New Horizons sent us to something we knew as the planet of satellites. And what they found shocked everyone. The top scientists also made a mistake about the Pluto, because the Pluto complex than previously thought. Maybe in the next list of planets, there will be no satellites, but one of the most exciting places in the entire solar system. Now you probably ask why the Pluto was removed from the list of planets. Well, the story goes back to the fact that the definition of being a satellite has always been changing. For example, we go back to the 1800s, when the new stars became serious. At that time, we had about 20 satellites because whenever one of them reached a new moon or even a large satellite, it was quickly discovered that it was a new satellite. Of course, there was a place to be taken advantage of this uncertainty. So they started defining more difficult laws so that what could be a satellite and what could not be. This process continued until we reached 1930. A godforsaken and inventive star named Clyde Tombaugh was used to follow the existence of an unknown planet. At that time, they thought that something far away in the solar system caused the Neptune and Uranus galaxy to be closed. Tombaugh spent about 10 months. Then he saw a dim light and saw that the other side of Neptune was moving very slowly in the sky. He was looking for a new satellite. And well, it seems that he has found it exactly. The law of the universe, although the laws were more difficult than 1800, in the decade of 1930, there were still only 2 laws for satellites. These were the 2 main laws. 1. The object must orbit the sun, because the moons are not counted as planets. 2. It should be in its own place, for the sake of the fact that the satellites do not count, because they are all gathered together there and are almost the same. According to what we saw at that time, Pluto had exactly this situation. Only the bright light of those distant things seemed to be. But well, this was just the appearance of the matter. A big change happened in 2006. When they updated the definition of being a satellite, they said that a satellite must have enough matter to be able to clean its orbit from other objects of the same magnitude. That is, it should be like a gravitational dominance. Everything that collects rocks, dust, and the orbit of the sun shows that this is my pen. But well, Pluto was not that stupid. He was not just in an empty space, but a part of a large area was full of different objects, which we now call the Kuiper belt. You can imagine the Kuiper belt. Everything that neither attracted the sun, nor went into the inner planets, nor took place in the gas giants. They made those outer rings and a huge ring. And the interesting point is that Pluto is not even the largest part of the Kuiper belt. It is only the brightest object in its region. That's why we thought it was the only one. In fact, Pluto is one of the brightest objects in its region of the entire solar system. The only thing that is more bright is the sun and the stars, which is also more because of its large orbit. So, from a distance, Pluto seems to be much bigger than what it really is. But the story of Pluto does not end there. Its orbit is very strange. It has a curved and horizontal orbit that sometimes takes it even closer to Neptune. It is approximately the same level as Uranus. In addition, Pluto's orbit has a special shape. Almost all the elements of the solar system rotate in a clear and vertical plane like a disk. But Pluto's orbit is about 17 degrees. That is, it is almost always either higher than that plane or lower. Of course, we cannot feel this strange being of Pluto very easily. Why? Because a complete circle of the solar system takes 248 years. The answer is in the description. If you like this program, please like it. Your like helps the YouTube algorithm to show our video to more people. So please like it, So yes, Pluto is no longer in the hands of the planets. I will open a parenthesis in the middle. Pluto is right in front of it. In French they call it Pluto, in English they call it Pluto. Now let's get back to the subject. Pluto is very strange and special. And strange things usually get very pleasant. For this reason, the scientists at Johns Hopkins University decided to create the New Horizons or the New Horizons to see how strange this Pluto can be. It is interesting that NASA has been working on this planet for the same year that Pluto was removed from the list of planets. Now, what was the biggest challenge? The distance. Pluto is very far. No one can predict the distance for hundreds of years. For this reason, a relatively old spacecraft, about 450 kilograms, was placed on the strongest planet they had at that time, Atlas V, which had 5 side buoys attached to it. The result was that New Horizons was like a bullet out of a bullet. It only passed by the moon for 9 hours. That is, about 10 times faster than Apollo's missions. After only 1 year, it reached the planet. NASA had a great opportunity here. The Image Testing System test. New Horizons took pictures of the planet and its moons. Even a detailed image of Io. But the main reason for getting close to the planet was not only photography. They used the planet's solar plexus as a projector. To make the image of the planet more clear, they put it directly towards Pluto. However, even with that project, the journey was still long. It took 8 years for New Horizons to move away from the outer solar system. Finally, in the year of 2015, Pluto became nearer to Echo and started taking the first pictures. At first, only 2 central cabos so bring closer to each other the government. Now, what were those 2 points? One was Pluto and the other was Charon's biggest moon. These two have a strange relationship. Charon is about half of Pluto and is very close to it. It is only about 20,000 kilometers away. For comparison, our moon is about 400,000 kilometers away from Earth. This close and strange relationship between Pluto and its moon has become interesting. It is like a planet. Like our moon, which is always on one side of the Earth, Charon always shows one side of it to Pluto. But there is an important difference here. Pluto itself always shows one side of it only to Charon. That is, if you look at the other side of Pluto, you will never see its moon. But if you are on the side near Charon, this image of the moon is always in front of your eyes, without even a particle being in between. The moon is always in front of Charon and its moon is always in front of its moon. But in reality, this is not the case. The moon is always in the center of Charon. It is so interesting that it is so much more interesting that it is no longer a turn of Pluto in the classical form. In fact, the center of the mass between these two is its center, in an empty point in space. Therefore, it seems as if they are both in a stop-by point. Some might even have made a mistake that there is a mini black hole there. But no, this is just an interesting thing that has a role to play. Now this is just the beginning of the story. When the new horizon or the same New Horizons is set, it is only interesting to see the moon is now the center of the universe. So it is very interesting to see that it is the center of the universe. This is just an interesting thing that has a lot of value. Now this is just the beginning of the story. When the New Horizons finally approached Pluto, it took the first real photos of its surface. And what it saw was different from what we imagined. If you had been waiting for a drop of blue, you should have said it wasn't like this. Pluto was a combination of dark red, light blue, white, yellow, and even orange. The first thing that caught the eye was the shape of the heart of the globe on its surface. This heart was made of a yellowed pebble. And the most interesting thing is that each side of this heart had a different personality. The area closer to the horizon of the New Horizons had a clear surface and a roof. The name of this area was called the Ismaili Desert. This desert is about 6.5 kilometers from the island of Isfahan. But what makes this area special is that no sign of the eruption of the meteorite is seen on it. That is, the surface here is constantly changing. It is active and alive, and every scratch and wound is quickly healed. The upper part of my heart is surrounded by strange holes. The corners that have been pulled down from the mountains are due to the natural movement of the glaciers that are visible from the height. The mountains are also known as the Mountains of the New Horizons. They are known as the Mountains of the New Horizons. And here was a point that was known. The glaciers on Pluto are not made of water as we know it on Earth. The surface temperature is extremely low, around -230 degrees Celsius. So the nitrogen and methane ices are extremely cold and cannot flow like glaciers on Earth. So the result was that the surface of the Pluto was made of more than nitrogen. The energy of the water is also a source of energy. It is interesting that the air we breathe on Earth is mostly nitrogen, and you probably know the nitrogen ice, the same fresh and cold water that cools everything it drinks. Now imagine how cold it must be for nitrogen to cool. That's where you reach Pluto. If we zoom in on the Sputnik Valley, we see on the rocks a world of lines and a few-way plan. These lines are formed due to the interaction of the waves, that is, the heat that comes up from the planet Pluto becomes a little cold, but since we are in the middle of space, water cannot exist, even nitrogen, so what happens? A phenomenon called acidification occurs, that is, the matter of the universe is directly converted into gas. These gases go up and make a thin hole around Pluto, of course. Not like the Earth's hole a little, but it is a very thin layer of color that is much higher than the surface because the Pluto's gravity is very low and cannot hold it firmly. The surface pressure of Pluto is probably 1,000,000 times weaker than the Earth, or at least when the New Horizons were launched it was like this because at that time Pluto was a Kuiper's wing. But we must remember that Pluto's orbit is angular and very strange. When it gets closer to the Sun, sometimes this atmospheric escape becomes more, and the size of Pluto can be to an extent so much so that it reaches even a quarter of the air pressure of the Earth, that is, 3 times the pressure of the surface of Mars, and maybe even then the situation will be such that the nitrogen ice really takes shape on the surface of Pluto. But let's go to another of the peculiarities of the creator of Pluto, that dark red dot that has been drawn out from the side of the heart. This area is called Cthulhu Maculae, of course. Its more scientific name is Tombaugh Regio. Now the main question is, why is it so red? The main theory says that this color is because of the tholins, a strange combination that when the sun's particles are made by the methane and carbon dioxide in the body of Pluto, these molecules, when they eat the particles, they stick together, turn red, and pour radioactivity snow on the surface of Pluto. Now if we look closely, we see some red dots on the surface. This shows that the ice, gas, and even maybe the water take those tholins to the top of the Pluto. Now let me tell you something even weirder. On Pluto, there is a giant ice hole called Right Mons. This mountain is about 5 kilometers high and its height reaches 150 kilometers, and in the face of lava, or hot lava with a mixture of sludge and sludge from water and methane, it is a giant ice hole. And the most interesting thing is that this is not just a single one of Pluto's ice holes, it's just the largest one. We don't know how many times it will be activated, but we know that this activity is still relatively new because with this magnitude only one of the giant rocks on the hole is seen. That is, this structure is not a desert or mountain. It is relatively new in the modern world. At least maybe every few million years it will be activated once in a while. But the main question is here, where does this giant ice hole come from? It is here that Pluto is more. We learned in school that Pluto is a giant ice hole, but the evidence that New Horizons collected says something else. Pluto's cell is still hot, that is, probably under the surface there is a large layer of liquid water, the same combination that scientists are waiting for to be found in the giant ice holes of the gas like the European Customer or the Titan of Saturn. There, the heat is produced more because of the terrible energy of the mother's plane, which constantly pulls the clouds and pushes them. But what about Pluto? We still don't have a definite answer for the heat of Pluto. We return to the first solar system. At that time, everything was hot. It was like a tropical guest, a young star in the middle of the tree. Its surroundings were full of gas, dust, sand, and stone, which gradually collapsed with each other. They broke, stuck again, and turned into cars and clouds, a mere cloud. But the situation became colder and calmer as far as we know. Smaller particles are colder than larger particles, but Pluto is small and the bottom of the solar system is in terrible cold. However, It is still hot inside, and this is why the name Charon comes in the middle. Perhaps the best explanation for this is that Pluto's strange existence is the same because Pluto and Charon are almost the same size. It is very unlikely that Charon has been pulled in the same way in the same place as Pluto. It is more likely that they have been torn apart billions of years ago, but instead of trying to cut one of them off, they started killing the planet. The energy of that split, and the result of Pluto's stupidity is that they are so powerful that they escape from its weak core and put the matter in space, and they gather on the North Pole. But there is a sad point. The pictures we are looking at today are probably the last pictures taken of Pluto in our lives, because NASA has now focused on the closest and most familiar places: Titan, Europa, Venus, and Mars, and there is no program for the New Horizons 2 right now. Of course, the New Horizons space shuttle itself is still a strange journey ahead with its appearance. Its entire contact with Pluto only lasted a few days, and then it immediately went into the depth of Kuiper's spine. We should remember that Pluto is only the brightest and most visible object. They're not the biggest or even the strangest. New Horizons is now in an unknown world and discovers strange things.